What's up everyone, hope you had a great day. Lethal Concept here, back with another one of my uncommon guides, this one for the Krogan Engineer. Now, for the Krogan Engineer, I play this class as a kind of close to mid-range skirmisher. Now, if you saw my Human Engineer guide, you saw that I used the Vanquisher Sniper Rifle and played off as a support sniper. Now the reason why I play the Krogan Engineer in a different way is because the Engineer for the Krogan has Incinerate instead of Cryo Beam. Our Incinerate causes a instant stagger effect and it doesn't require you to charge like Cryo Beam. So the playstyle is more of a kind of rotation with a very standard approach. So I'll go into that a bit later on with the playstyle. But with my skills I have maxed Overload, Incinerate, Offensive Tech, Rage, leaving 1 point in Assault Turret. Now for Overload, I have for rank 4 recharge speed. You don't need the damage because for Overload, you use it more for an AoE stun and to actually proc all 5 enemies with Elemental Tech for the debuff. So you definitely want the recharge instead of the damage. I actually go for the jump upgrades, and by jump I mean charging, and when you charge it you jump to additional target instead of the shield damage, because once again, this build actually allows you to deal with the shields fairly easily, unless it's something like a Destroy, which obviously has a large amount of shields. But for such as shielded enemy mooks, you don't really worry about them as much, so I just go with the jump charges. That's why I picked the jump upgrade instead of the shield damage upgrades. For Incinerate, I go with Burning instead of Radius. Now, this one's a bit more of a personal preference than actual which one's better. So, because I'm using Overload as the first opening skill, enemies will be stunned and therefore you're more able to hit them and they won't be able to dodge. Radius, it's nice, but I actually prefer the Burning. The Burning combo is nice with anti-armor because shields, you're able to deal with shielded enemies quite well, but you're not as strong against the heavy armored targets such as Fiends or Berserkers, so anti-armor with Burning deals quite a significant amount of damage. Now rank 6 I obviously go for Detonator because that's the only detonating skill that you can use reliably. You don't have anything else that detonates reliably. Well, Overload, but you start off with Overload, so you don't want to use it to detonate. For the 6 ranks in Offensive Tech, I go for Power Enhancement, plus 20% power effect duration for the Elemental Tech. You don't really, again, use combos because combos don't deal as much damage in Mass Effect Andromeda, which hopefully they patch. Now for rank 5, I go with Anti-Armor. Again, this build allows you to deal with shielded enemies fairly easily. I'll explain that in a playstyle later on, so I go with Anti-Armor to help deal damage with anti-armor targets with stuff like Incinerate. So Elemental Tech over Weapon Mass Reduction, because Weapon Mass Reduction doesn't actually give you a lot of benefits, whereas Elemental Tech will actually boost your damage, because if you use an ammo booster, that will actually boost the damage from the defense debuff. And since you're proccing the defense debuff on like 5 enemies at a time with a fairly short cooldown on Overload, it's very useful and much better than Weapon Mass Reduction. Now for Rage, I have all the upper upgrades. The lower upgrades, the B or quote unquote B upgrades for Rage are more melee oriented. I really want the survivability, so I went with all the survivability upgrades rather than the melee upgrades. So obviously resilience over melee, health and shields, regeneration, because this combos with Berserker, which triggers when your health goes below 33% and it regenerates your health to full. Now for leveling, I would actually go for 4 ranks in Overload first, 4 ranks in Rage, max Offensive Tech for the Elemental Tech, then max Incinerate for the Detonator, then max Overload for the jumps, and then max Rage last. Now the reason why you want to go this kind of route is because you want the rank 4 on recharge. 20% with the other 10% makes a recharge fairly short, and that will allow you to CC enemies in groups of 3 more often and allows you to take them on fairly easier. And then I'll go for obviously 4 ranks in your health. I basically always go for at least rank 4 in the health passive upgrades for all my builds. If you're going for silver, you really like the health upgrades, so that's why I went for 4 ranks in Rage. After that, maxing Offensive Tech obviously allows you to deal more damage with your powers and deal more damage with your ammo boosted weapon. After that, obviously max Incinerate because that's your detonator. Now, if you're asking why I don't max my Incinerate detonator earlier, and that's because you don't actually use Incinerate for the detonator per se. It's a nice added icing on the cake kind of thing, but it's not your main reason why you use Incinerate, and I'll explain that in the playstyle a bit later on. After that, obviously max Overload because you only have Rage and Overload left to max, so Overload's more better for you to max, and then afterwards max Rage. Now for weapons, I am using the Hurricane and the Scorpion as my secondary. Now if you've seen my guides before, you know I love the Scorpion as a secondary. It's just incredibly well-rounded. So the Hurricane. Now the Hurricane, you can use the Equalizer. There's 3 main weapons that you'll probably want to use: the Charger, the Hurricane, and the Equalizer. Now, we both know that the Charger is a poor man's version of the Hurricane, so I won't talk about much about the Charger, but with the Hurricane you got an insane fire rate, which allows you to proc stun easier with the Disruptor ammo. Also, it requires less precise aiming since it aims in like center mass, and also it requires you to take thermal clip storage. And with the Equalizer it doesn't require you to take that because Equalizer obviously has no ammo. It just goes off a kind of 100% charge where you deplete your charge every time you shoot, and that restores itself automatically. So Equalizer is one of the options that you can use, but it requires you to aim more since it fires in a fairly small amount of area, rather than a Hurricane. You can just fire at center mass and it'll just spray the bullets in that area. The Equalizer also has a lower rate of fire, so you'll have to fire longer if for some reason Overload doesn't stun the target, which actually happens in a couple of my games. You actually see that I use Overload doesn't stun the target, and therefore I'm priming with my Disruptor ammo. So that's the reason why I use Hurricane and Scorpion instead of using Equalizer and Scorpion. For consumables, I actually obviously use Disruptor ammo. If you notice here, I've run out of the uncommon and basic Disruptor ammos. I'm just stuck with the ultra rare and the gold. That's how much I love Disruptor ammo. For the second one, I obviously go with power efficiency mod. As you can see here, I'm very low on supplies for power efficiency. As for your equipment, obviously thermal clip storage. And now for the playstyle. As for the playstyle of this build, so what you do is you follow a very simple rotation that allows you to be very effective against any enemy that you see, barring Berserkers because they sometimes stun and they sometimes don't stun, depending on if they got stunned earlier or CC'd earlier, and obviously boss mobs. Now, so you start off with Overload first, and this will stun 5 enemies, proccing your Elemental Tech. Now, even if it doesn't stun, because you hit it with Overload, your enemy will still have Elemental Tech on them, if they just wouldn't have been stunned. So obviously one of two things will happen: your enemy gets stunned or your enemy doesn't get stunned. Assuming your enemy gets stunned, this allows you to shred them with Hurricane with Disruptor ammo, and since you're using Disruptor ammo, their shields just disappear really fast. And after that, the enemy will probably be regaining from the stun stagger animation, and that allows you to use your Incinerate afterwards. Now, 2 things will happen. You will detonate your Disruptor ammo, which causes a tech field that stuns anything else that walks through it. But the second main important thing is that Incinerate has a stagger of its own. It's kind of the fire stagger animation, and since you have the stun animation and the fire stagger animation, you kind of like stack those two apart and therefore CC the enemy for the entire duration that allows you to kill them with your Hurricane. Now, if your Overload doesn't stun, with the incredibly fast fire rate of Hurricane, this allows you to stun them anyways without Overload, and you still be doing quite a lot of damage with Elemental Tech. Now, this will still strip their shields incredibly fast, and then you still use Incinerate afterwards. And this will cause them to obviously enter the fire stagger animation and kill them pretty fast. You basically aren't afraid of anything one-on-one except Berserkers, because they take a fair bit to kill obviously, and any boss mobs. So that's the reason why I kind of went with this build. You may think like Overload, Detonator, and Primer. If you didn't know, Overload primes. It just has a very short window when you use Overload that you can actually detonate it. So Overload, Detonator, and Primer. Incinerate detonator, and primer with rank 6. So you'd think that you'd use like a combo based build where you start off with Overload on shielded enemies, detonate that with Incinerate, or you start off with Incinerate on armored enemies and detonate that with Overload. But you're not actually making use of the like stagger kind of effects of them, because Incinerate and Overload both have different staggers. And if you notice, obviously when you stun an enemy and you try stunning them again, they have kind of like some resistance to it. That's the reason why is because it's the same kind of stagger. You obviously can't constantly stagger the enemy with the same kind of stagger, quote unquote stagger animation. This is the reason why once you use a kind of tech field, the tech explosion for the tech field, once an enemy walks through it, they don't obviously keep going through the stagger animation of stunning. So that's the reason why I spec instead to use Overload first on any type of enemy for the stun animation, and then Incinerate afterwards for the fire stagger animation. This is a very straightforward kind of rotation that you go through: Overload, Incinerate, then Overload, then Incinerate, using Hurricane in between, and it's very effective actually. You obviously won't get a lot of points because you're not detonating, for example, just instantly detonating as soon as possible. You're kind of like spreading out your effects and spreading out your staggers. But I find this playstyle very enjoyable. I just like making the enemies feel helpless and just pelting them with a Hurricane. Anyways, a more in-depth description with the text, Reddit text guide below in the link below. Thanks for watching. I'll leave you with the rest of the footage and hope to see you again.
I'm reading a flatline. What's that? Just 3 hostiles remaining. Reload. We're tracking reinforcements.
That was great.
We're done here. Get yourself to the LZ.